Okay, it's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session. This is actually the second part of a session series that we're doing on low carbon city concepts, and for this one we will focus on the citizen engagement part and the public participation in the low carbon city. My name is Roman Mentle. I work for ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. That's an international city network with about 1,000 members, and low carbon cities have been one of our main work areas in the last 25 years that we have existed as an organization. And so we are very proud and happy to present you three excellent speakers actually from our member cities, talking about their perspectives on what a low carbon city is and how that relates to citizen engagement and working with the people that live in the city. We will have, first up, we will have Councillor David Chernushenko from Ottawa City. He is also the portfolio holder for environment in the city of Ottawa. Then we will follow up with Milita Boric. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Yes. From the city of Zagreb. She's representing the Office for Energy and Environment. And then last but not least, we will have Svante Sjöstedt from he's an environmental analyst from the city of Gothenburg in Sweden. So bear with us for 90 very interesting minutes of talking about low carbon cities and citizen engagement in that context. Maybe we can start right away with you, David, and your presentation. If you want to, I'm not sure if you want to use the screen here or the podium or what you prefer.
Well, I'll need to be able to change the slides, so however I best do that. Yeah.
Let's put this away.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you see the screen from over there, or do you want to switch places?
The screen is not showing the same things.
It's not, okay.
Yeah, I can't see
No,
it. So
I think you need to look at the big screen.
Yeah, but then I won't be able to.
Can we use the screen over here? Is that possible, or there's no? The presentation doesn't really show that.
Maybe I'll go to the podium.
All right.
That way I can see which slides I'm showing you and make sure that I'm speaking to the right slide. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to join you. As you've just heard, I am a city councillor from the city of Ottawa, capital of Canada. And I didn't get my tutorial beforehand on where to point with this, so just go for it. Oops, now I've gone twice. I am going to focus my presentation today on some of the cultural needs in order to achieve a very good environmental or sustainable result. What I mean by that is it's great if you've got the technology, if you have a program in place, but if you don't have the citizens supporting your initiative, or worse, if you actually have the citizens fighting your initiative, you're not going to achieve either your result at all, or perhaps you won't realize the full potential of what you are trying to do. So I'm going to use a specific example from a particular neighborhood in the heart of my city. But just so you can situate yourself, I don't ever want to assume anything. So there's Canada. The arrow is pointed to the city of Ottawa. It is the capital, and it's right on the border with the province of Quebec and the province of Ontario. It is a very large surface area. The city of Ottawa, if the formal city of Ottawa, is huge at 2,800 square kilometers. I can drive 100 kilometers from one end of the city to the other, from farmland to suburb to city to suburb to farmland again at the end. So it's very diverse, and it's not at all dense, as you can imagine. And that's one of the big challenges to achieving some gains in per capita reductions in per capita greenhouse emissions and many of the sort of per capita outcomes that we'd like to. So again, to focus down a bit, the red dotted area, Old Ottawa East, is very close to the central part of the city, and you see the orange corridors with the tall buildings. Those are parts of the city that are becoming more dense. We use the term intensification. It is a city policy to intensify. We want to move from being a very sprawling, not dense city where public transit is very hard to offer and to pay for, and a lot of city services are expensive to provide because the city is so widespread and the population is so widespread. So we've been focusing on some key corridors like the ones you see. This particular area of Old Ottawa East, as the name implies, it's one of the older parts of the city, but it's mostly single homes, relatively close together, but rarely taller than 2 stories, and with a lot of open area. There you see a little more of a focus for you. Do I by any chance have a laser with this? He's going to guess. Yeah, there we go. Does it work very well? Not really. I'll go right up and point. This particular area I'm going to describe, which has a lot of green space right now. The translators can't hear me. There we go. Got me now? There we go. There's a very large area of green space, which is where there's a university and several religious orders. The Oblate Fathers have owned this piece of land. Main Street is a street that's mostly residential, has a little bit of commercial activity here, and we have a bus transitway station up in this area. There is a plan to make the whole area much more dense. We are in the process of building Ottawa's first light rail line, which will run through here, having a rail station there. And this main street, actually called Main Street, is transforming right now. Back to this. Here we go. The area has a lot of valuable assets. It's got history to it. It's got green space. It's got some commercial activity. It's got a university. But as part of Ottawa's policy of this intensification policy, there are a number of things that we want to do to double the population, to redevelop that area. I was showing that it's green space. Are you catching me there? I'll go back to this microphone. Getting signals from people. What was important in this process is that starting way back in 2005, the community realized that it was going to change. Ottawa had adopted this policy of intensification, and the people who lived in that area were not against it, but they wanted to be sure that it did not destroy the existing character of the community. So they embarked on a process with the city staff to develop what we call a community design plan. It's abbreviated here as a CDP, a community design plan, where in a sense it's pre-planning, pre-zoning. So they identify in advance, if we're going to have some taller buildings, where would we want them to be? If we want to have more commercial buildings, where would they be? If we're going to have a few actual towers, where would they be? And the engagement between the community, the current councillor previous to me, and the city was such that it was a very collaborative relationship. So shortly before I took office as the councillor, they had almost wrapped up that plan, and I was able to help see it through to the end and make sure that we brought in some of the business owners and the large landowners so that they were felt a part of this as well. Let me see what my pictures show. Another key part of the redevelopment of this area is its street itself, Main Street. Main Street was once a main street, what the British often call a high street, or what you may know as sort of a main shopping street, but it deteriorated from about 1970 onward. It was doubled from being just 2 lanes to being 4 lanes. The end result inevitably was faster and faster traffic, a much less attractive place for people to want to walk and stay. So the businesses were slowly dying. parents were saying, oh, I won't let my child walk to school. I'll have to drive them because it's too dangerous to be on that street. So in fact, what was a vibrant historic community was actually deteriorating. We saw the street had to be completely dug up to have all of its underground infrastructure replaced, all of the sewer and water infrastructure replaced. And I and some members of the community identified this as a real opportunity. Do we put it back as a 4-lane, I'll call it a highway, as a 4-lane, very fast-moving boulevard? Or do we, in a sense, contribute to the rebirth of this neighborhood by making it, and I'm going to use a term that we are now using a lot in North America, particularly in Canada, a complete street. This term complete street is a name we've adopted, which is really saying, for the last 50 years, our streets have become very incomplete. They've been developed, or they've given preference to the private automobile, not to pedestrians, not to cycling, not to public transit, not to on-street commerce. So in effect, in order to make commuting times faster, we've undermined many of the other important features of a neighborhood. And we recognized that for people to want to move from the sprawling suburbs into a downtown area, for businesses to want to set up there, we had to create an environment that was attractive to them. And again, this was an example of where I happened to be in the right place at the right time. The local residents and my own city council were just at this time coming to realize the old way wasn't working. That North American do everything for the car of the 70s through the 90s, it was undermining everything that we wanted. Somehow we'd followed this wrong-headed notion that all will be great if it's easy to drive and to park. And we had to start undoing this. And I would be lying if I said it was easy to undo this. No, there were many interests. There was just the old way of thinking, where I had some of my own councillors saying, well, that won't work. People won't want to walk or cycle. And we had some businesses worried that it might not work. What if we make all these changes? So I have to perhaps help you understand a little better by what the change to the complete street is here. What you see here is a full cycle track. We now have wide sidewalks. This project is under construction right now. We're having wider sidewalks, a full cycle track, and we're actually removing 2 lanes of traffic. That is a first. That's the first time in Ottawa and almost in any North American city other than perhaps New York, where some of the major boulevards that were 6 lanes were brought down to 5. But to actually take a central street like this and reduce the amount of space allocated to the car and increase the amount of space I would describe as allocated to people and to life, to urban living, was the big change. To my pleasant surprise, in the end, we won the vote at council, got support, and this is now, this concept of the complete street has been adopted as a city policy. And in fact, we have other cities showing tremendous interest in what Ottawa is doing, even though we're not finished yet. Just the idea that, oh, you voted to do it and the work is underway has proven of considerable interest. So the combination of having Main Street redeveloped as a complete street and now a bit the pièce de résistance, if you will, this neighborhood, I pointed out at the start, the green space that has a university and a former religious order there. It's now being fully redeveloped as a residential neighborhood and a mixed-use neighborhood, so much denser. There will be a few single homes. There will be a number of sort of 2 to 3 story homes, some condominiums as high as 6 or 8 stories, and then all of the buildings fronting on this new Main Street will be mixed use. So we will actually find, imagine a supermarket in a downtown neighborhood in North America. No, all the supermarkets are way out in the suburbs. They're starting to come back in now, and one of the buildings will have a smaller scale supermarket there. A number of the features that lead to our, how is this sustainable? How is this environmental? It's maybe not immediately obvious. Well, because we will now have the new population of about 1,500 new people, plus the existing population of about 5,000. going from quite a dispersed neighborhood with lacking many of the features that they need to feel like I can do almost anything I want in this neighborhood without getting into a car, and actually now reversing that and finding those things there. This is what we will see as a result of this. So some of those features there, it's too far away from you, so I will point out a few of them. Some of the key sort of overtly sustainability features of this area. Within this particular new redevelopment, we are going to have parkland. We're going to have access to the waterfront. The Rideau River runs right along that side for you, the light blue area. We are going to see very water-efficient landscaping, trying to not just have the water go immediately into sewer pipes and run away, but actually have it infiltrate into the soil, be kept on the site. We are seeing a number of very high energy efficient standards. Typically in North America, we use the LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, the LEED standards of ratings of buildings. This entire neighborhood is aiming to be a LEED certified neighborhood, which will actually be the second in Ottawa, but among very few. And I believe they're aiming for the platinum level, which is very high, the gold or platinum level. Purely having that walkable street and that cyclable street, many of us, even here in France, perhaps, we look to Copenhagen, we look to Amsterdam, to some cities in Germany, perhaps, for sort of very high levels of cycling, of population choosing to cycle and feeling safe and comfortable doing so. It's quite rare in North America. Ottawa, as it stands right now, is about a 4% modal share by bicycle, but in the downtown core, about 10%. 10% is starting to be significant. 10% is at a level where people are actually noticing, wow, there are a lot of bicycles. And so when we build a new specific cycling infrastructure project that would in the past have been dismissed by many as, what a waste of money. No one's going to cycle anyway. Everybody drives. You're just wasting your money. Now they're actually starting to see the result and understanding, oh, that wasn't a waste of money. We built a dedicated cycle lane through the downtown area. 5,000 people using it per day. Wow, that's significant. So this main street will have a dedicated raised and separated cycle track, and it will connect into some of the other cycling infrastructure that we've built in the city. And the point that I wanted to really highlight and just repeat here as I'll wrap up this introduction is what was so key to this was that the residents in the neighborhood did not fight it. And they didn't fight it, first of all, because they were involved from the beginning. That idea of developing your own community design plan. Not the very clever people who are employed at City Hall will tell you what your neighborhood should look like, but rather, we want to know what you want from your neighborhood. Of course, we can't do everything you'd like. There are some constraints, but really involve you in this. And then when the redevelopment of this Greystone Village, as it's called, on the lands that I've been showing you, the redevelopment of Greystone Village, the developer who purchased the land and the rights to do that work, they recognized that they would be far better ahead if they showed the community what they were planning to do, got their feedback, made changes that the community might like to see. That would be a much better business plan than perhaps purely maximizing profit and doing what they, purely what they wanted to do. The end result has been fascinating because there were a number of very sustainability educated people in this neighborhood who have actually taught the developer a lot. And we now have a developer who will come out of this process being able to say, hey, look what we've learned and look what we do. Now we'd like to use these lessons in other parts of the city. I saw this way back in the Sydney Olympics in 2000, where some developers were forced to learn new skills, and then once they'd learned them, it suddenly became their business card. We are the sustainable developers. We know how to do this. Look what we've done. I don't want to be too, I do want to be optimistic. I don't want to be naive in thinking everything is going to be perfect. Much of this is a work in progress, but for Ottawa and for North America and likely for a lot of cities in the world, that approach and the kinds of renaissance, if you will, of older, somewhat run-down neighborhoods. There is a lot that we hope to be able to share from what we've learned and can share with other cities. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, David. Excellent. I know it's after lunch, and I hope that you all enjoyed the lunch break and had a good session in the restaurant. But that's why I want to sprinkle in a few audience questions in between the presentations that we have. So if you want to ask any question directly to David about his presentation, then we would like to pass a microphone around. And don't be shy, we have excellent translators in the back so that you can ask your question in French and we will answer them here. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question? Yes. And if you could please just quickly state your name and where your affiliation as well.
Yeah, Martin Rasmussen. I'm from Gladsaxe community north of Copenhagen. Well, we have these issues that you're talking about, and I'd like to dig into a little bit about what you were talking about with the city or the community. What do the businesses say about the transportation issues? I mean, we have areas in our city where the businesses say, well, get rid of the bicycle roads and let's be able to drive. And that's a problem for us because we'd like to have those, what you say, multifunctional areas where you can both live and work. Did you have any issues about that, or could you elaborate on that?
Yes, gladly. Got the microphone on? Yes. That continues to be a challenge because both citizens and businesses, they know what they've seen, and anything new is automatically different and therefore frequently seen as a threat. And particularly, and I'm sure you're seeing this, parking. On a street has a limited amount of space. For the first thing I often point out is a street is a piece of public property. We even have to remind people that. The public owns this thoroughfare, owns this land. As policy, we should decide how it's allocated. How much of it is given to the car? Well, we went to the extreme of allocating almost all of it to the car, and we've realized that was too much, and we're now moving back. How far back do we move? We're not sure. But because space is finite, if you're going to put in a cycle track, you have to take something out. Unless you happen to have a very large boulevard where, take a little bit of grass out and you can get in a bicycle lane. But in downtown streets, you are removing parking or driving space in order to put in a cycle lane. That is seen as a threat to either the commuter, who wants to be able to drive freely through, or the businesses who assume that parking is critical to their business. The trick is, as I know you're going through and many European cities are going through, and we're just on the early stages in North America, the trick is to help businesses understand that a shopper is a shopper. Your client can get to your business by many ways. How are you making it easy for them? In the most congested streets, we're making the argument coming by car is actually far less efficient. People are spending a lot of time stuck in traffic. They're finding a lot of time looking for parking. If you can offer them an easy place to get to by public transit, or to highlight that walking and cycling is a viable way of coming, what we know is that the cyclist or the pedestrian, they won't pay as much, they won't buy as much per trip, but because of the ease of getting off of a bus or locking up their bike and popping in, they'll come much more often. And so what we've learned is they're actually spending as much money or more. They're just doing it in smaller pieces, more frequent trips. But we can't dismiss this obstacle and say, oh, Mr. Business Owner, you're wrong. No, you are right that traditionally that parking space has been critical to your business model. We have to help you understand that catering to a customer can be done in a different way now, and it's not easy. It's taking time, and it's meeting some resistance. I'm just pleased in this project, very little resistance. Very little resistance in this particular case, for the most part, because the businesses had died because this road had become so dominated by fast-moving traffic.
Thanks, excellent. I think at this point we can move on to our next speaker, which is Melita from the city of Zagreb.
You can switch the slides. This is going back, this is forward. Okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I need my glasses just to see how it's going on. So, good afternoon. I am from the city of Zagreb administration, and I am involving in organization. It's okay. Yeah, in organization of Zagreb Energy Week. During my presentation, I will try to explain you why we consist on Zagreb Energy Week and why it is so important for energy policy of the city of Zagreb. The Zagreb Energy Week started in 2010 and now is 6 in the road. And of course we are now in preparatory phase for the next year. I will talk about our campaign, about inclusion of younger generation, inclusion of civil association, experts, open door days, international conference, and about our Energy Info Day. Our goals is raising public awarenesses on the issues of energy saving and inclusion and education of stakeholders from the all levels. During Zagreb Energy Week, we have about 45 different events, and through these events, we promote new technologies of sustainable development, renewable energy sources, green jobs. We give information about financing sources, innovative products, new technologies, which can help in energy savings and CO2 reduction. Our message is, development we don't want to stop, but pollution we can. Sorry. Our goals is, I already said that, sorry. Campaign is very important in aim to involve much more citizens and stakeholders during Zagreb Energy Week. For campaign we have different tools, and such as city lights, jumbo posters, promotional posters, flyers, official website, Zagreb Energy Week info, and also the event announcement and promotion through the website of our stakeholders. Also very important is press conference in the City Hall, where we announce Zagreb Energy Week to media. Participants are on that press conference, except mayor and head of city offices, are stakeholders who are involved in organization of Zagreb Energy Week, and that means participants are deans, principals, directors. Mayor's reception is in the Palace Dverce, and the Palace Dverce is only for important guests of the city. So that is how we show our stakeholders that they are very important for city. And that is the opportunity for mayor not only to say thanks for stakeholders, but also opportunity for that stakeholders to arrange cooperation between different of them and gain cross-sector approach. And that is also opportunity for them to have conversation and discuss about common interest. During Zagreb Energy Week, we involve our children from the kindergartens, primary schools, secondary schools, students from the technical universities. It's about 27,000 children, and the events are in 350 different locations. That also means that we involve their teachers as well as their parents. To encourage them, we have different approach. For kindergartens, we produced coloring books and give them windmills, balloons, t-shirts. But also very valuable material is handbooks for kindergarten teachers. It's made by teachers and energy experts. It's about how teacher can organize game for children and in the same time teaching them about energy saving and preserving environment using simple materials and simple techniques. For primary school, we develop picture books, Tell Me About Energy, with simple games which contain questionnaires about climate and energy, and of course all answers about that questionnaires in that picture books, so that means they have to read it. For secondary school, we developed handbooks, climate and energy, and topics are described on interesting way for their age. Students, they are great and very innovative. We have our event only special for them in the city hall, and probably that is the first time for them to be there. And they are speakers. They present their good projects, and that project is selected by deans and professors from different technical universities. And how it looks, it is just a few pictures, of course. Civil organization is very important in connection with citizens. They have strong will to help citizens in specific field. They have different knowledge and different skills, and they know about problem in their neighborhoods. They have innovative ideas and projects. They are very keen to exchange of experience and good practices. They have good networking. So during Zagreb Energy Week, civil organization organize workshops for their members and citizens, but also they are doing specific projects, such as teaching citizens how they can do solar collectors on their home, or a specific program in schools. So on many different ways they can help citizens. Inclusion of local experts, we include them through the Croatian Chamber of Architects, Mechanical Engineer, Electrical Engineer, and they have their seminars and share knowledge of new technologies and solutions in field of their interests. We involve Croatian Auto Club. They doing workshop for their members, but also they have teaching lessons of eco-driving, and that is how citizens can learn how they can drive on eco-way. Croatian Chamber of Economy have seminars about ecological industry and trades, a Chamber of Trades and Crafts about green jobs and new skills. Energy Institute Hrvoje Požar is our eminent institute with great experts, and they're dealing on a national and local level. Important is also expert from the ministry. They are talking about their strategy, about legislative framework in which local authorities have to deal. Energy Efficiency Fund and Croatian banks talking about financial supports for energy projects. Of course, sharing knowledge on European and international level is important for every community. So we include international experts from the ICLEI, Eurocities, Energy Cité, European Investment Bank, ProClima, Hanover, as well as from the European Commission, Joint Research Center, Passive Institute, House Institute, and we try to gain currently interesting news, knowledge, and skills. Guest speakers is the representatives of world cities, ministries, and provinces. You know about Brussels environment and what they are doing for Passive House. On the Warsaw, Poland, how they use structural fund, or Provincia di Torino, which using Elena fund. Belo Horizonte and Shanghai share their knowledge and experience with us, and many others. Open Door Days is aimed to expert citizens, students, and pupils, and it is opportunities to show them how it works in practices. And they are very interesting. We organize groups to go there, and maybe I can talk about Solar House Špansko, which is excellent, a shining example of private house who are doing solar panels, photovoltaic panels, and actually passive house, and show that for citizen. International conferences is aimed for local authorities in Croatia, but also for local authorities in region. The programs always contain a strategy and legislative framework on European and national level, financial models and opportunities, new technologies and solutions, as good as practices and new projects. If we compare first conference and the last one, we see a huge step forward in supporting green process toward urban sustainability in all sectors. And how it looks. Last day of the Zagreb Energy Week, we organized Energy Information Day. It is aimed to citizens. Location, what we choose for that, is the main city square, and day is Saturday. And that is important because near of that location is our main market, Dolac, and at that time everybody is there. So we reach a lot of citizens because of that. Exhibition is supported by 45 different participants, and it is limited number because of space. And how it looks? It is a very rich program, and you can see it is electrical car, solar panels, photovoltaic panels, but also children projects. The exhibition show approach of the Zagreb Energy Week, importance of integration of all levels. Long-term partners is meaning to have continuously relationship during all year in mutual interest. Every citizen is important in creating city's future. Only with the answers of each individuals with climate issues, with existing together in way towards sustainability for our future generation, is the answer how we can going. Let's keep them together in common goal. Sustainability is in our hands. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Melita. You could do the same thing again. Is there any question in the room that you would like to ask to Melita? Okay, then maybe I have a question for you. I find it quite impressive what Zagreb is doing in terms of engaging all these different levels of citizens at the same time and bringing that into a very large and rich program. For me, it was very clear that there's a lot of engagement of the citizen happening in terms of awareness raising and letting people try out and think about sustainability. But is there also an outcome that the city gets from the citizen side, basically the feedback or suggestions? Maybe if you want to compare it to what David talked about with their participatory approach to city planning, that would be great if you could elaborate a bit.
Yeah, the very important is continuously work during all year. So we have connection with civil organization not only through this Energy Week, but during all year. So we know what they wish that we do for sustainability, and we try to involve that in our urbanism plan. So about bicycle path, we have bicycle group for that. And our bicycle path is more and more involving in the city streets. And we also have the new project of that group is a map of the bicycle path. And on that map you can see what is the best way to go with one part city to the second part city. So that is their projects.
Great, excellent.
One example.
And so this is happening on a continuous basis in Zagreb.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, very good. Last chance for the audience. Does anyone want to ask a question before we move to the next presentation? Okay, I guess that means that you're up, Svante.
A little bit tall. Thanks for letting me come in here. I'm asked to come here to speak a little bit about our work on consumption-based carbon footprints and our work in the city of Gothenburg that have helped us a lot. Maybe I prefer a microphone. Yeah, that's better. And this has really helped us to develop our work with the climate issues and to broaden the perspective in that sense. I think these have some strong connections also to the overall theme of this session, because it's strongly connected to quality of life and to the public engagement, but not directly as these two fantastic examples as you have given to us. I will also say some words about research that we have done in Gothenburg with connection to this theme, and showing trying to answer the question, what will consequences be on quality of life if we do if we have a low carbon transition in our society. But first, just a few words about my city. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Yeah, Gothenburg is the second largest city in Sweden on the west coast, and compared to Paris, it's a tiny city. Of course, there's about 500,000 inhabitants within the city, and in Greater Gothenburg, there's about 1 million. Since Gothenburg was founded about 400 years ago, it has been a shipping and trading city all the time, and we still have the biggest harbor in Scandinavia. And there are also a large industrial sector. For example, Volvo, SKF and other factories are still in the city where they started once and employ tens of thousands of people. But we also have broadened our sectors with 2 universities. We have a lot of research on life science and transportation solutions, for example. If you compare Gothenburg to the 2 other biggest cities in Sweden, Malmö and Stockholm, we still have a lot of municipally owned companies, for example. that are responsible for the energy production and also for the public housing sector, for example. So that gives us, I would say, both the responsibility and the opportunity to do something about many of these energy and climate issues. To start with, I would like to say some words and try to explain what consumption-based carbon footprints is. It's not, maybe you don't know that. Basically, there are two ways of calculating greenhouse gas emissions. Traditionally, we used to calculate the two boxes to the right. And it means that we calculate the emissions within the geographical area in a city or in a country. And it's often called the production-based emissions. But when calculating consumption-based emissions, we exclude the export part, but we add the imports. The imports of products and services that the citizens and inhabitants are consuming and that are leading to emissions elsewhere in the production. So this means that we know to have some knowledge about the life cycle perspective of the products. So the two boxes to the left-hand side is representing the consumption-based emissions. Why is this important? Yes, at least in Sweden, and I guess in many other European and North American countries, there are two different trends about these two kinds of emissions. If you look at the geographical area, for example in Sweden, the emissions is decreasing all the time. But when we do the other type of calculation, we can see that it's the opposite. So here we have calculations on the Swedish consumption and the emissions from it, where the light blue part represents the production of products within the country, and the dark blue, the imported products and the emissions connected to that. And the overall picture shows that this kind of emission is increasing. But this is not the only reason to do these calculations. It will also give you new information and new views on this, and you will reflect on new areas of emissions. That is very useful, I would say. Another reason why this is not so common to do this calculation is that it's much more complicated. It's a little bit tricky to know all this about the products and the life cycle assessment of them. But we have had help from the Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, as well as a Swedish technical institute called SP. And we have succeeded to do the first calculations on a local, in a local perspective in Gothenburg. So first we made a calculation of the situation today. What are the consumption-based carbon footprint for an average inhabitant in Gothenburg? But we also made 3 different scenarios that you can see here. The first scenario was, and they are all of these 3 scenarios are for 2050, just to figure out what do we have to do to reach a target to 2050, to reach a sustainable and equitable level of greenhouse gas emissions. And as I think most of you know, it means that we have to come down to about 2 tons per year of greenhouse gas emissions to reach the 2-degree target. So the first scenario there, business as usual, means what if the trends that we have had until now will continue? What will the situation be 2050? The second scenario, current climate policy scenario, we calculated what if we reached the target that we have taken. For example, in Sweden, we have a quite ambitious target according road traffic, where we 2030 will cut the emissions by 80%. So this is included in this calculation. And finally, we have a low carbon transition scenario where we are quite ambitious. We're trying to do all the best and see how far can we reach. And for example, it means a 50% reduction in residential energy, a 50% reduction of consumption of meat. We are not traveling by air traffic as much as we have done before, and much more service-based consumption instead of products and so on. So here are the results. Ta-da! The first bar here to the left means the reflects the situation today, 2010, and it's about 7-8 tons of greenhouse gases that the citizen is emitting per person, an average person. And the first scenario with the business as usual means that the emissions will be much higher 2050. Not so surprising, maybe. The current climate policy scenario is better, but it's not good enough. We will reach down to about 5 tons per year, but a sustainable level to 2050 is 2 tons. And with a low carbon transition scenario, we managed to go down to below 2 tons per year. And that's good news. It means that it's possible from a consumption-based perspective to reach a sustainable and I would say equitable or fair level of greenhouse gas emissions. But of course, this is very different from person to person. There are individual variations. And just to show that, we have compared a typical high-income family with a low-income family. And the resident with a high income will have about the doubled emission. It means, in this case, they have 2 cars, they live in a big house, compared to the low-income person who lives in a flat that is heated by district heating, and they have no car. So, of course, there are big differences. And there are big differences between us all. We eat different things, we live in a different way, we travel in different ways. So, no, wrong direction. I said that I should explain a little bit about research in Gothenburg connected to quality of life and if we have a low carbon transition. And this is not very easy to do, and the results, there are of course a lot of uncertainties here, but at least we have tried, and the method was to ask about 1,000 people about their quality of life. Questions like, how satisfied are you with the life as a whole? And how happy do you feel in general? And the same 1,000 persons, we also were investigating their greenhouse gas emissions from transport, heating, electricity, and so on. So the dots up there is showing the quality of life that they experience, and the dots beneath is a division of the respondents with very low greenhouse gas emissions. Here, for example, here's the 10% that is emitting about 4 tons a year, up to the group that emits about 14 tons a year. And as you can see, there's no significant relationships between this, meaning that if you're a big emitter of greenhouse gases, you are not so much luckier. It's good news. So, yeah, the conclusion is that there is no obvious trade-off between a low-emission lifestyle and high level of well-being. For example, there are no statistical significant relation for how the number of flights you're doing per year, or how much meat you're eating, or how much you commute in a car. That's not very funny, so it's not so surprising. But not the dwelling size, how many square meters you live in. But there are other factors that is a very strong connection to the quality of life. And here we have having a job is important, having a partner, have good health, less time pressure, and the opportunity to spend time together with friends and the family. This is strongly related to quality of life. And I think all of you agree on it when you think of it. So I also want to say some words about how this knowledge for us have been used in the city of Gothenburg when we are working with the climate issue. And here is a program that was adopted a year ago by our city council. And this is a mix of the production and the consumption-based carbon footprints. And I think it's, for us, this is the way to do it, because it's also important, of course, to know about the emissions within your geographical area and to take response of these, because you have the possibility to do so very much about it. You can illustrate it by this picture, where this island of activities is showing the geographical emissions. The blue is transport, orange is industry, and the green is energy. But when we do the consumption-based calculation, for example, the industry in Gothenburg, the most emissions is coming from refineries producing fuels that are exported. So these emissions are not counted for in the consumption-based carbon footprints. They are flying away in this small cloud there called export, but instead we are calculating for import of food, clothing, electrical devices, iPhones, etc., and also for the air traffic, the air travel that the people living in Gothenburg are doing. So the emissions today, this is similar to the bars you saw before. Looks like this. The person to the left is showing the situation today, and I think some people are getting quite surprised that, for example, our air travel is comparable in magnitude with driving our car driving, and that food stands for so big emissions, and especially here, meat production and also milk production stands for a huge amount of these emissions. And it's also surprising that the gray part here, the public consumption, meaning the activities within the municipality and other public institutions, the buildings we have, the transports we have, the meals that we are serving to the kids in the school or in the hospitals. This stands for a substantial part, and down there is like the rest of the private consumption, let's say the shopping. And for 2050, we need to go down to emissions to our knees. And this is just one example. This is the low carbon scenario. We can do this in many ways, of course. But we need to come down to 2 tons, a sustainable level in some way. So, to be more concrete, we have had targets for 2050, 2020, but we haven't get into detail on what are the important steps, what is the roadmap. So we have 9 new targets for 2030, and they are covering both this production perspective and consumption. So, for example, it's about our district heating system, that it's covering about 90% of all buildings, but still we are using some fossil fuels in this system, natural gas. So to 2030, we have decided to phase out all these fossil fuels. Energy efficiency, of course, and energy efficiency in buildings is strongly connected to the first target. We have a target for how much renewable electricity and biogas we have to produce, and there are some brochures down there if you want to look at the numbers. We have 3 targets on transports, where number 6 is including the aviation. We have targets on food and purchase, and these are only for the municipality to start with. And the last target here is to reduce the amount of household waste. And this is important in itself, but it's also a very good indicator of consumption. We have 24 strategies, and I won't go into detail of everyone. So we have grouped them in 5 areas, And I would say that the first one is very much about dialogue and communication, of course. I will come back to that one. But it is also urban planning, energy and transport, as it used to be. And we also have some strategies connected to consumption. And I will just give some examples, and then I will be finished. First, reduce the climate impact of food. And I would say that in this area, we already have a very good work. As an example, in all schools and preschools in Gothenburg, we are serving vegetarian food at least once a week. And this has a huge impact on the emission. We are working to reduce the food waste and other things. And we also are cooperating with other actors in this area. There are strategies to promote sustainable activities and alternatives to air travel. And these areas are quite new for us. We don't yet know how to do here, but at least we are aware of that we can't influence this directly. We have to cooperate a lot with other actors. And as an example, we have realized that there are parts of the municipality that we haven't been working together with before. We haven't seen them as actors in the climate issue area, like the Department for Culture, for Sports, for Parks and Nature, for Tourism. This is strongly connected to have an attractive city where people want to stay in the weekends or even have their holidays. And tourism is also very strongly connected to air traffic. We are trying to get tourists to Gothenburg very much by air traffic. Shouldn't we be better to try to get tourists that are coming with train, for example, in the future? Dialogue on climate change. These are colleagues of mine in the environmental department, working a lot with this, especially with people, teenagers. And to the right, I got two examples. Green Hack is a project this year where we're using social media to have a dialogue with people. So right now there are thousands of people that we're interacting with through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and so on. And down there is a game that was released just a week ago called Future Happiness Challenge. And this game is in English and it's free to download, so you can try it. In this game, you are in a city and you made a lot of different choices. Where should I live? What should I work with? What should I eat? And the winner is the luckiest and the person with the lowest emissions of greenhouse gases. Finally, I would like to stress one thing, and that is that the municipalities shouldn't, I think of themselves that they should fix everything. I think there's so much going on, and I think this is international. So many initiatives from young people, from NGOs, from entrepreneurs, and I think the role for a city, for a municipality, is to support all these initiatives. And this photo is from the neighborhood where I live, and I think this example is so fantastic because it's called a mega flea market. So once a year, all the people who lives in the neighborhood are selling their things. Where I live, there's 6 apartments, and I know that everyone will stay there on the street and selling their things. So, and there's coming about 10 to 20,000 people every time. And the role for the municipality in this case, I would say, is not to stop it because it's a little bit anarchistic. It's not to taking over. I think it's just to support. We can help you with the waste management. We can help you with the transport in the pub, with the tram, for example. That is the way to transport here. So I think that's important to know the role for the municipality to speed up this transition. Yep, thank you. That's all from me.
Excellent. All right, I think that was a very interesting presentation with a lot of important messages in it too. Do we have some questions from the audience? I know it's very late in the afternoon and it's a bit stuffy in here, but maybe we can have a quick round of waking up and have at least one question to Svante directly before we move into a general discussion. Any volunteers? Oh, I think it's very quiet.
Everything is perfectly clear.
Okay. Then maybe Svante, I have a question that interests me a lot because this is now the third time that I'm happily listening to the presentation. It's always very interesting. One thing that I ask myself is when you mention the different groups of people that have different impacts from the 4 tons of CO2 to the 14 tons, what kind of choices do people have to make to get down to a level, especially if you have a very high level of CO2 emissions per year, if you're one of these 14 tons people, what kind of impacts does it have on their life? And how do you get to specifically these people? Because I'm assuming that the ones that are already at the level 4, these are the ones that you could also tackle with supporting them with the energy efficiency in buildings and these kind of things. So how do you get to the group that needs to maybe make the biggest change there?
Yeah, I think, as you have seen, it's strongly connected to income. The emissions, and of course you can have a consumption that don't give these huge greenhouse gas emissions, a consumption of services, for example, and one thing is to work less, because then you get a lower income and you will be happier. Let's try it. The thing is that the city of Gothenburg, we can guarantee our 50,000 employees that they can work 100% if they want. It's very common, especially for women, that they work, for example, 60% or something. But they are guaranteed now to work 100% if they want. But since just some time, we can also give the opportunity to work less than 100% if you want. Not guarantee, but the city will do all it can to help you to work less if you want. And this gives the employee a very much freedom, and it also gives you the opportunity to emit less greenhouse gases. And if you have a lot of money, you want to go on holiday to Thailand, you don't have to go every year. You can stay there a month instead of a week, or travel somewhere not so many times, but trying to take part of the culture and the land much more when you're there. Just some examples.
And maybe to open the floor to all 3 of our panelists, I would like to get a little bit into the culture that you have in your cities with the citizens in terms of their low carbon behaviors and what they expect, what their version of happiness is. Because I mean, I'm very happy that you raised that point, that happiness is not necessarily connected to low carbon emissions, but at the same time, what is happiness? Maybe that means something different somewhere else, and then it is more connected. So maybe David, if you want to say something about that in terms of the local culture that you have there, what the mentality of people is, and if there are challenges or positive things that you can work with in Ottawa as well.
Well, I'll start by purely on got the microphone on this one? Purely on the work week and alone, I think North America is more towards the extreme of almost defining ourselves by what job we have and how much we work. And we sometimes look admiringly to Scandinavia or even here in France or other countries and say, oh, they take a much more balanced outlook on life, but then other times we're actually a little bit dismissive or even superior senses like, oh, they're lazy, they don't work enough, whereas we're not. We work harder. But I don't see any positive outcome in terms of happiness to the working harder. So that's an interesting approach that I don't think we've really begun to seriously discuss, other than perhaps things like work splitting initiatives where you might have 2 people sharing a job. It's often in combination with raising a child, so it may be a parent of young children choosing to share a full-time position with another one. But it's increasingly as people get towards the end of their careers now as well. We're also putting a lot of emphasis on the idea of telecommuting. How do we help a city employee to not to have to commute into their job at all? And there we get a much more identifiable environmental improvement in a number of ways. One is the actual greenhouse gas emissions and smog emissions of someone not taking a motorized trip into work by being able to perform their job from home. And the other is, since I illustrated the problem with having too much space dedicated to cars, if we could even take 20% of the typical daily group of commuters off of the road because they are in somehow not taking a daily commute anymore, that's road capacity that we don't have to build. Or getting back to the question of support from businesses, that's road capacity that could be allocated to some other activity. In the broader sense of support for sustainability work, we're at a very interesting moment in Canada. Right now, we're about to have a federal election in 5 days, and we have a federal government that for the last 8 years or so has almost been the anti-environmental party, and so we're coming out of what I would call quite a dark period. A lot of activities had to happen at the municipal level because we've received very little support from the top. From the top, where we've been hearing a message that is sometimes even climate change isn't happening, it's not a problem, pump more oil, it's good for the economy. On a good day, it's, well, yes, we know climate change is happening and it's not very good, but, we're just one small country with one small emissions. And the oil sector is so important to our economy, we can't possibly put it in jeopardy. So I think the pendulum for support for initiatives like this is shifting, and particularly in municipalities. There's a lot of talk during this election period about how it's fallen to the cities, the municipalities, to do all the hard work because they're not getting leadership from the top. I'm hoping that will change, whoever ends up being the winner in this election.
Coming back from the large-scale politics level, maybe again to the ground. Can you, Melita, can you tell us a little bit about
Zagreb's happiness?
Yeah. What does low-carbon happiness look like for Zagreb citizens?
I think the citizen from Göteborg's happiness is also work in the Zagreb. I think the citizens from the Zagreb wish to have such opportunity to have that kind of happiness. But in Croatia is still economic problems. So we are looking about green jobs, around raising our economy through these new technologies. And the truth is, because the economy, the more of people use public transport and use bicycle, and that is good for city. We also don't have so much industry as in the past. That is also good for city. But the truth is also that we want to do something what we can do with not using so much funds, not so much, because raising awareness. If you know what is it about, if you know that simply if you put that paper, that waste, such in the something what is not suited, you're doing wrong. So you have to think about that. You have to think about electricity. You don't need light during all the night. So that some simple things can help us. And of course, if you have enough money to refurbish your house, it is not same. We refurbish now public buildings, schools, but we also teach consumers how they have to deal in new buildings, renovated buildings. Because if they open door in renovated buildings, they will still energy consumption big. So that is how we acting, and actually the citizens is kind happy with coffee and so on.
If I might add just a very short point, you raise this with the cycling and others. I find fascinating how surveys from around the world show that people who essentially they're surveying people for how much they enjoyed their daily trip, usually their daily commute to work or to school or whatever it is. And it's pretty much universal that walking and cycling, people who walk or cycle to work enjoy their daily commute the most. Public transit and driving are pretty much equal. It shows you that we have work to do with making our public transit systems more pleasant as well. But so that's an argument, just this happiness connection as well. Is it's not just about the environment. We often have to think very carefully about how do we sell this message to people. You're saving the planet. Ride your bike. We know that doesn't work very well for people. You know, they're deciding to ride their bike because it's convenient, it's cheap. They enjoy it, not, you know, what will I do this morning to lower my greenhouse gas emissions? And we have to understand the human psychology of that and take advantage of the fact that people are, it is a happiness outcome.
Again, actually, at this point, since we don't have a French city on the panel, we've been inviting them, and it didn't happen. But maybe we have some people from France here in the audience that would like to comment on that, because I'd be really interested in having that aspect of what does happiness mean in France, and how does that connect to maybe a low-carbon living, or is it disconnected as well as in Gothenburg? I would be very happy if we could have a quick comment on that. Is there anyone who wants to tell us a bit about that? And of course you can go in French, since we have a very good translation here as well. Excellent, back there.
Merci. Gaëtan Lazzara, je suis maître d'ouvrage dans le secteur du logement social. Le titre de la conférence parle de comportements. Or, on sait depuis quelques années que les individus, y compris et surtout sur le plan économique, ne se comportent pas de manière rationnelle. Depuis 2002, époque où un prix Nobel a été attribué pour la première fois à un psychologue et qui a créé un peu une nouvelle comment dirais-je, un nouveau domaine de recherche qui s'appelle l'économie comportementale. On sait que malheureusement, si l'information et la rationalité fonctionnaient à plein pot, les choses ne seraient pas où elles en sont. Hein. Nous serions déjà dans des villes vertes, les sociétés auraient déjà changé, etc. Ce n'est pas le cas. Vous faites allusion les uns et les autres à des comportements vertueux d'un certain nombre de citoyens, mais ce n'est certainement pas la majorité des citoyens qui se comportent comme ça. Donc ma question c'est... aussi bien en Suède qu'au Canada ou peut-être en Croatie, quelles sont les actions que mènent les politiques publiques en matière d'incitation comportementale? Est-ce que la méthode des nudges, qui aujourd'hui commence à être connue un peu partout dans le monde, est utilisée? Je pense qu'au Canada ou en Suède, elle doit commencer à l'être depuis quelques années. Est-ce que vous avez des exemples en la matière? Alors, j'ai vu qu'à Gothenburg, on mettait en place un serious game. C'est déjà un élément qui va dans ce sens. Est-ce qu'il y a des actions qui sont prévues et qui se développeront dans les années qui viennent, justement, pour modifier peu à peu les comportements des gens, sans les inciter, parce qu'effectivement, on peut proposer le changement par la réglementation, par la fiscalité, mais par des méthodes autoritaires. Mais on sait que ça marche pas forcément comme on voudrait. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres méthodes et quelles orientations prenez-vous pour y arriver?
It's a question of how do you nudge people into the right decisions, basically, I guess. So, any one of the panelists who wants to address that?
Go first.
Yeah, okay. I will try to answer. I think what you talked about was very important in city planning, for example, to involve people when it comes to the neighborhood you live in yourself, and especially if it will change. It's very important to involve people. This can be very good. But there's also some kind of work that the citizen will not see, but they will feel the effect of. Just to creating a dense city, where it's easy to go by bike and reach things, to live your everyday life with the services nearby you. if we also lack of urban sprawl in Gothenburg. We're a very car-dependent city, but our plan is to do it much more dense and connected. And if we do so, and if we have good public transport and a safe way to go by bike, people will do it. Of course, they have to do their choices themselves, but we should do it possible for people, I think. That's very important. That's one answer. You can say something more.
Yes, sure. Je parle français aussi, alors j'ai bien compris les questions, mais je crois que je suis mieux de répondre en anglais. I know that if I change, it's a very Canadian thing to do, particularly in politics. You have to show that you speak both English and French, and you alternate in sentences, and it confuses the translators enormously. So I will answer in English. Thank you very much for the question. I think this whole area of behavioral economics, of social marketing, it's sometimes called. I'm not an expert in it, but I'm fascinated by it, and I've done quite a bit of reading on it. We come to understand that you cannot communicate with people or incite them to change purely through the head. A lot of it is through the heart. A lot of it is connecting on the emotional level. So we've seen for years people selling sprawling suburbs that have extremely high environmental impact and social impact and economic cost to build these distant suburbs. The people who build them don't sell them on buy this cheap home. They show you pictures of happy people out riding their bicycles and kids playing in the fields. Because they've understood that you sell your home through a feeling. Oh, I'd like to live there because it looks like a happy place. It looks like somewhere where people like me will be my neighbors. We have to take that kind of understanding that commerce knows very well and apply it in government and in social change, so that we are now seeing that the downtown redevelopment, the denser urban environments, they're not saying save the planet, move here. They're saying, no hassle with cars and parking. Don't worry about time wasted in your commute. The shop is just 1 minute outside your door. They're showing pictures of cafes. They're showing pictures of music being played in the park. And so they're connecting on an emotional level. And that sort of social marketing knowledge, we really have to learn. I think the huge failure of both the environmental movement and governments who've tried to push people towards sustainability is that we've preached to them. We've preached the morally superior way of living, whereas we have to understand better how to connect through other means. And it's absolutely true that we are not just economically rational animals. So we mustn't make the same mistake in reverse too, by saying, ride your bike, it's cheap. Move downtown, it's cheap. People are also not making those decisions purely in that way. So I guess in the end, it's a bit of a mix. We take many of these things into account, but we have to understand better how to inspire change through the heart.
Milita, is there, when you think about Zagreb and the Energy Week, is there an essence of that as well, that you say like we want to sell a positive image, or do you also have elements where you feel like this is where we make it maybe the right choice, make it more easy to do, but also make it a bit more difficult to do the wrong things? Is there like this nudging aspect there as well that you do in Zagreb?
From the Zagreb Energy Week, I have some only good experience, because more and more stakeholders try to be involved in that with their organization of events. So I think we really have success with that week. But what I like to say, that we continuously have information campaign for citizens, not only through this week, but through all years. We have our info galleries for energy efficiency and climate issues. We have info center for citizens, only for that energy issues. So also what we are doing, we support them. We have some grants for citizens to doing solar panels on their homes. we also have some grants. It's little grants, not big, but enough to push them in that way. So some grants for civil association for their projects and programs. So that is how we connected with them through all years. And with communication with that, we know what they are thinking, we know about their ideas, and try to find solutions how we can incorporate that in cities politics.
Very good. Do we have another question from the audience? Okay, then I'll continue. One thing that I would like to bring the discussion back to a little bit is we talked a lot about how cities work with the people and what that relates to the feeling of the citizens. If we turn it around and maybe come back to your presentation, David, at the beginning, where you say you have a planning process that is driven by an inclusion method from the very early stage. Can you talk a little bit about what it is that a city actually gets as feedback? Maybe especially the surprising feedback. So not so much the okay, now everybody is on board and we're all happy with what the city is doing, but the kind of maybe the disruptive feedback where citizens say like, no, I want this, and the city is like, oh, okay, I didn't know you were interested in that. Is there some examples?
Well, the first thing I have to say is if I were saying what I'm saying here today in front of an audience in Ottawa, perhaps they would be surprised to hear me painting such a rosy picture. I picked a particular project in a particular community where it went really well. For the most part, the complaint we get from the public is you don't consult early enough, you don't consult often enough, and even when you do consult us, you don't listen to what we told you anyway. You've already decided what you're going to do. The consultation was just pretend. Here's what we're thinking of doing. What do you think? We hate it. Oh, we're doing it anyway. So I think that Ottawa is changing. We're getting better at it, and this was a particularly good example of that. The process for a community design plan, it's really intended in neighborhoods that are going to change. They are neighborhoods in transition, and in this case, people particularly recognized Main Street with the capital M, is not working. So we would, and the density is too low to support the shops that we'd like to be able to have here. The density is too low to be able to make the case for improving the level of public transit. So you had a community that recognized we really like where we live, but it's got some shortfalls, and we'd like to address those. So that's why they especially got engaged in this. In the end, the best that we really could do with the outcome of that community design plan was say, okay, we're going to have to, things are going to get more dense. You're going to have more people living here. Even with the redesign of the street, that probably means more people with cars. So it will probably be harder to park. And the general response we got was, yeah, we know that. That's okay. Not too much, but, it's okay. But I want to have a say in where that is. If you're going to have an 8-story building where in a neighborhood that's currently 2 stories, it should be here, along the main thoroughfare, at the start, the entry to the neighborhood and the exit to the neighborhood, not willy-nilly anywhere, you want to put up a tall building. And when the outcome showed that, there was generally a positive, oh, okay, the neighborhood is going to change, but you heard me, and I'm all right with that.
All right, excellent. We only have 3 minutes left, so maybe if we could do just a quick round of last statements. It can connect to that point, actually, since we talked a lot about the happiness side of it. So maybe if Svante and Melita, you want to say also something about the side of what do you learn from the citizens the most when you engage with them as a local government?
Yeah, I also want to stress the importance of a dialogue at an early stage. The 2 biggest projects within Gothenburg have 2 different scenarios. One of them is that we have congestion charges. We are the smallest city in the world having congestion tax. And the decision was made very, very quick. So the politicians and we who were working with environmental issues, we were so happy because all the money will be invested, not all, but most of them will be invested in public transport, but the people weren't there. So there were becoming a movement against it, and we had an what do you call it, an election or a referendum on this, and it says no. But after that, there were a lot of investigations trying to solve the problem, and the politicians decided to go on because they said we need this investment, we need this conduction. This is a bad example how we didn't have dialogue enough. We thought that we were very pedagogic and could explain for people. The other example is much better. The really center of Gothenburg is empty now. It has been its former industrial and harbor areas, and this will be developed the next 40 years maybe. And there have been a very good dialogue process, I would say, including people from all over the town, because this is the city center. This is the part of the town for everyone, for the region. And I think when you have a dialogue, you should listen. Not just listen and then take other decisions, but listen to what people really said. And one critical point was, when you build new buildings in the city center, it's only for rich people. That's one example. So now we have decided that 25% of the first part of these buildings that will be built will be, let's say, cheap apartments. We said that to the developers, you have to do this, and you can have higher prices. We don't have this social housing system in Sweden. It doesn't exist. We try it. Maybe we won't succeed, but at least we have listened. And there are other examples how we try to develop this area by really listening to people.
Very good. Melita, the last word goes to you.
Thank you. Yes, we have to listen to our citizens. As example, we have a workshop with managers and principals of kindergartens and schools in aim to change behavior of consumers. And they listen very carefully. Some principals said, I don't understand topic, but it's nice your accent, how you talking about that. So that's meaning they need knowledge. So one principal said, okay, can you go in my school and teach others, because I cannot explain them what actually do you want to achieve. So my conclusion is the citizens really need knowledge, what is it about, and to spread them, teaching one person to teach other person. So that's how I can see that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for bearing with us. We're out of time, and maybe we can end the session with another big round of applause for our three excellent panelists. Thank you very much.